The One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025 seems like a pretty significant overhaul of tax and trade policy.
That's right.
Passed the House, but just barely, right?
215 to 214 on May 22nd. Now it's over in the Senate. He's 51 votes there, then potentially the president's signature. So not law, but definitely on the move.
Okay. Our mission here is pull out the key takeaways, specifically on operations and costs for logistics.
We want to give you a concise, well-informed view of the tangible effects.
The big picture is potential domestic stimulus, but paired with fiscal worries and definitely higher import costs.
Very much so. A push and pull.
Welcome to Logistics Pulse, sponsored by Mothership. Skip the broker to save big on LTL shipments, or deliver same day nationwide. For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's start with the big picture, this macro context, some pretty significant tax cuts.
Things like making those TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provisions permanent, and lower income tax rates. And the thinking there is this could stimulate the economy, short term anyway, boost spending.
Consumer spending, business investment. It could even boost long-term GDP by maybe 0.8%. Let's say the flip side. The Congressional Budget Office apparently estimates this could add, well, a lot to the deficit, something like $2.5 to $3.1 trillion between 2025 and 2034.
That's substantial. And that raises worries about interest rates down the line.
Higher deficits could mean higher interest rates. And the bill also includes a huge $4 trillion debt ceiling increase.
And what about trade? There was a big shift there, too.
A major one. The repeal of the $800 de minimis threshold.
The duty-free limit for small imports.
Correct. Potentially forcing a rethink of global supply chains.
How does this specifically hit freight and logistics operations day to day? This is where it gets really practical for our listeners.
Accelerated equipment investment. It allows for 100% immediate expensing.
For things like trucks, trailers, maybe warehouse automation, qualified property.
Exactly. If it's acquired between January 2025 and January 1st, 2030.
So for a logistics company, that means you can write off the full cost right away instead of depreciating over years.
Correct. It directly lowers the upfront capital cost. Makes it cheaper on paper to modernize your fleet, expand warehouse capacity, that sort of thing.
Seems like a pretty clear incentive, but is there a catch?
Yeah, the potential issue flagged is if everyone rushes to use this tax break at the same time.
You could see huge demand for trucks, for equipment.
Which could strain the supply chains for those manufacturers. And ironically, maybe drive up the purchase prices, eating into that tax benefit a bit. Something to watch.
Interesting dynamic. What's the next direct hit?
Immediate 100% deductions for building or rehabbing manufacturing plants through 2034. And 111110 raises the gross receipts threshold for small manufacturers.
To $100 million in 2026, I think. So more companies qualify for certain benefits.
Right. The clear goal here seems to be encouraging more domestic production. Think CPG, building materials, that kind of stuff.
And the knock-on effect for freight. More stuff made here means more stuff needs moving domestically.
That's the expectation. An increase in freight volumes, particularly LTL in truckload shipments within the U.S.
Capacity constraints. Is that the potential problem?
Yeah. This growth, especially if it's concentrated, could potentially overwhelm existing truck and rail capacity in certain areas, near the new factories maybe.
Leading to potential congestion, higher rates.
Okay.
So more volume, but maybe more headaches getting it moved smoothly. What about the import side impact?
Right. That brings us to number 3, higher import costs from that de minimis repeal we mentioned.
So taking away the $800 duty-free limit for commercial shipments, effective July 1st, 2027.
That's the date in the bill, yes.
So practically, what's the impact on a logistics firm handling import? Just higher costs across the board?
Pretty much. Higher import duties will be applied more often, especially hitting those, low-value e-commerce type goods, apparel, electronics, maybe that currently flow in under that $800 threshold.
The cost of handling those imported goods just goes up for the importer and likely for the logistics provider too.
Absolutely. And a broader implication here, it might actually reduce the volume of import-driven freight over time.
Because it becomes less economical.
Exactly. And it could push companies to seriously look at domestic sourcing, or maybe nearshoring, as a strategy to get around those higher import costs.
That could really reshape supply chains, right? What's the fourth direct impact?
Labor cost pressures. A proposed 5% excise tax on remittance transfers, money sent out of the country.
And why is that significant for freight and logistics labor?
This tax would directly hit the disposable income of many immigrant truck drivers, warehouse staff who often send money back home.
And the sector already has labor shortages.
Around 80,000 drivers short currently. So this tax could make those jobs less attractive, potentially worsening the shortages.
Which, for businesses, means more competition for workers, higher wages.
Drives up wages and ultimately freight rates. This could be particularly tough for time-sensitive stuff, like food and beverage transport.
Okay. Man, it really is a mix. Incentives for investment and domestic freight, but then rising costs from imports and these labor pressures. A complex picture indeed.
It absolutely is. Okay, what are the strategic implications? What are the actionable insights for businesses navigating this? The first one is optimize capital investments. Basically, take advantage of that tax break we talked about. The recommendation is to prioritize buying equipment, trucks, trailers, maybe warehouse automation before that January 1st, 2030 deadline expires.
And the rationale is straightforward. Lower capital cost helps you build capacity for maybe increased demand later.
That's the idea. But, as we discussed, the analysis also advises keeping an eye on those potential equipment shortages if everyone else is doing the same thing.
Makes sense. Any execution tips offered?
Yeah, it suggests doing careful ROI modeling, maybe working with financial advisors, and trying to lock in supplier contracts early. Secure your place in line, essentially.
Good practical advice. Okay, strategy number 2.
Expand capacity for that potential manufacturing surge.
Okay.
Anticipate strain on logistics networks, especially maybe in more rural or newly industrializing areas.
So what's the action? Build more warehouses.
Securing long-term contracts with carriers to guarantee capacity and potentially investing in regional distribution hubs to be closer to that new manufacturing activity.
And execution-wise, how do you figure out where to invest?
Be ready to ramp up.
Got it. Anticipate the bottlenecks. Now, what about counteracting those rising import costs?
Mitigate import cost increases. The core recommendation here is to transition towards domestic or perhaps nearshore suppliers.
And the timing on that is key, right? Aiming for mid-2027.
Yeah, because that de minimis repeal kicks in July 1st, 2027. The logic is simple. If imports get significantly more expensive due to duties, you need alternatives to protect your margins.
So start planning that supply chain shift now.
Execution steps like auditing your current suppliers, actively searching for competitive local or regional options, and maybe adjusting inventory models to be less reliant on long-distance imports.
Okay, that's a big strategic shift for many. Right, number 4 deals with the labor problem,
Yes, address labor shortages proactively.
which are potentially made worse by that remittance tax. So what can companies do?
1, focus on retention implement programs like bonuses, better training, things to keep the workers you have. 2, explore automation more seriously.
Automation as a way to offset the lack of available human workers or the rising cost of them.
Both, potentially. In a tight labor market, wages go up, delivery costs go up. Proactively budgeting for higher labor costs. Maybe 5–10% increases.
Budgeting for it is concrete.
Yeah.
And piloting automation in warehouses, for example.
Exactly. Test it out, see where it makes sense for your operation.
Okay, and the final insight about risk.
Right. Number 5, hedge against fiscal risks. This ties back to the deficit concerns.
The potential for higher interest rates down the line because of the increased borrowing and the debt ceiling hike.
The large increase in government debt could raise borrowing costs for everyone. So if you're planning major capital projects,
Lock in your financing now, while rates might be lower.
that's the recommendation. Secure fixed-rate loans for those big investments before potential rate hikes make that borrowing more expensive. Work closely with your banks, explore fixed-rate options, and keep an eye on indicators like Treasury yields for signs of where rates might be heading.
That covers the 5 key strategic areas highlighted in the analysis. It's a really comprehensive look at how to react. Just to kind of summarize what we've learned from this analysis today, the OBBBA, if it moves forward, presents this really complex sort of dual picture for freight and logistics.
Yeah, you've got these potential upsides incentives for investment, potential for more domestic freight demand, but running right alongside that are significant challenges, rising import costs, serious labor pressures, and those background fiscal risks. It's about strategically using things like the expensing provision, getting ahead of capacity needs, actively rethinking your supply chain sourcing, tackling those labor issues directly, and being smart about financial risks.
Indeed. Well, thanks for digging into the analysis with us today.
My pleasure. Always interesting stuff.
For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.